So welcome everybody. I'm Corinne, the Managing Director of Ethical Sales, and I'm really delighted to be joined by a guest panel today to talk about all things virtual sales. And they're all going to be sharing their stories about B2B sales activities and how things have been going for them in the last 18 months or so. I'm actually personally really looking forward to this session because I know that we're all going to come away with loads of ideas and different perspectives and tips and tricks and sort of new approaches to our B2B sales activities. And I do think it's quite good timing as well, because I think as we kind of move out of the immediate challenges of the pandemic, we're kind of moving into a different phase. So I felt like this was a really good time to be talking about some of the issues that we've all been experiencing as business development people. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we kick off. So please do use the chat to introduce yourselves and who you are and where you're from. I'm afraid we're not going to have a chance to go around and ask every attendee who's here, but it would be great to hear from you. And please do use the Q&A down the bottom to ask any questions during the session. Myself and Harriet are going to be keeping an eye on the questions that come through, and we're going to make sure we reserve a good amount of time at the end to cover them off. Don't feel like you have to scribble lots of notes. I'm sure you've all got your lunch or your coffee to hand, because we are going to be doing an insight piece about this session next week, and we're also recording the session, so you'll be able to watch it back. So let's get started with the first question. I've got 3 questions for the panelists today, and so I'll be asking each of them in turn. And panelists, if you could unmute yourselves and introduce yourself when I ask you to speak after the first question, that would be great. So my first question to you all is, how did the COVID pandemic impact on your B2B sales activities, and how did your business have to adapt in order to overcome some of the challenges? So I'm starting off with a really meaty question there. John, I wondered if you could introduce yourself and maybe kick us off. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, and also thanks for having me on the panel, and also can I say how refreshing it is to be a minority male of 1 on the panel, because all too often it's the other way around. So well done for putting such a good panel together. Big Clean Switch is effectively an energy brokerage that has 2 parts to our business. On the one side, we normally operate a household price comparison platform, and on the other side, we help businesses to source low cost, low carbon energy products. I guess in terms of that side of the business, that's probably where most of our B2B sales activity lies. And the greatest initial impact was, it's very much a relationships-based sales process, and the loss of face-to-face contacts, particularly through things like exhibitions, was felt quite keenly. And in addition, we were also finding that businesses that we were able to speak to had an awful lot of other things on their minds with COVID, an awful lot of them, facing existential threats. So energy, quite far down their list of priorities. So we were having to work much harder to get heard. And in response, we tried a number of different things. One was to actually change the pitch. One of the consequences of the pandemic was that due to the slowdown in economic activity, energy prices hit at the opposite end of the scale to where they are now, all-time lows. And actually that gave us a really good road into talking to people differently. So almost using the situation to our advantage and saying, this is a really great time to fix your prices, take advantage of the situation if you can. And then in common with many other businesses, I suppose, we transitioned to try to focus on other channels, and digital and virtual channels were obviously a big part of that, alongside the use of introducers, very often businesses working in our space who offered complementary services, where we have tried to beef up our activity in both referring them on and asking them to try to make recommendations for us, and that's a really strong part of the way that we sell now. Kind of examples have included accreditation on the Tesco supplier forum as their preferred supplier, but also through some of the contacts we've got in related businesses, and that's something that we're really, really keen to pursue because the quality of the leads that you get is really, really strong. Other approaches include a long overdue focus on SEO, which we were pretty slack at previously, and webinars like this one, which we've also found work incredibly well to, I guess, demonstrate the value add that you can offer as a business and articulate to people why you're different from some of the other people in your space. So yeah, very kind of supportive of webinars like this. I think you might be muted.
I'm muted, yeah, thank you. Okay, let's move on to Sara. Do you have some thoughts you can add there for us?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the founder of Healthy Nibbles, and we essentially exist to make healthy choices the easiest ones to make, typically in the workplace. We're sort of 98%, I would say, B2B. In terms of how we were affected, we have a number of different sort of products across the range. So healthy vending, autonomous retail, so big sort of unmanned cafes and snack boxes are from the first get-go, from the first lockdown, our revenue through things like the vending channel, because it's within that workplace, ceased. So we had to really sort of look at how we adapt very, very quickly. Nothing like some pressure to make you finding creative ways of getting in touch with people. I think what we did find for us in terms of navigating that from a B2B perspective, I think just, again, reflecting what John had said in terms of getting, the priorities have changed completely. The first few weeks of sort of speaking to clients, they were trying to navigate co-working facilities or, getting tech equipment out to our employees. So healthy snacks were really not high on the agenda topic. But what we did find is just being able to work with the existing clients that we had in terms of repurposing what we had. So a massive shift from vending or corporate snack boxes into individual solutions. So employees at home, and providing a sort of a really holistic service around sort of supporting nutrition, but also providing them the goods. That worked really, really well. I think what we did find of value was staying really closely connected to our clients, even through this period. And they were able to actually then provide referrals to other companies that were going through similar challenges and situations. So we were able to get really, really, really strong referrals on that basis of just working with existing clients. And then we did move a lot to the digital side. We did explore B2C, touched waters and retreated rapidly. But what we did, I think for us in that event, we really solidified our strength in the B2B market anyway, and where we're well positioned. And it was just around looking at content. We did reach out. We found that there was an awful lot of, obviously a lot of the phone lines weren't necessarily working, being able to get through to people. So it was really reliant on really, really strong content, using the channels that work. So for us, LinkedIn worked a dream, and relying on emails and then going back to these referrals. So it came from multiple different angles, essentially.
Brilliant, thank you. I've got lots of sort of follow-up questions, but I think let's just move on to Suzanne, and then probably come back to each of you with a couple of things, because this is all really, really useful stuff, I'm sure. So Suzanne, could you introduce yourself and let us know what happened with you and Zedify in the last 18 months?
Yes, thanks, and thanks for inviting me onto the panel. My name is Suzanne Blake. So I lead sales and marketing at Zedify. We are the largest operator, zero emissions operator of cargo bikes, trikes, and EAVs in the UK. So we were founded 15 years ago, before anybody knew what cargo bikes were, and now I'm sure most people can see them zooming around their cities. So I guess we were the kind of rare exception in that logistics and last mile delivery, and especially sustainable deliveries, have just gone through a complete boom. So we're really fortunate that we are really established in the market. So we were kind of front of mind when the pandemic hit, and obviously a lot of businesses had to reappraise how they got their goods to their customers, and that affected most sectors, most kind of notably retail. So we didn't really have to pivot too much. We had a lot of incoming requests, and it was more about having the scale and scaling up to meet those requests. But also we had different types of sales and different types of businesses approaching us. So we did a lot of work with councils, delivering food parcels to those in need. We did a lot of supporting independent retailers transition to e-commerce. So making sure that they, revitalizing the high streets and supporting them get their goods out to their customers. We moved into doing quite a lot of healthcare, so working with pharmacies, getting prescriptions out to patients. And also really it kind of gave us an opportunity to look at all the different types of sectors that were reinventing themselves and reinvigorating. So, for example, subscription boxes have gone through, sales have gone through the roof. So we kind of doubled down on outreach to those kinds of companies, taking on work with the likes of Grubby and kind of food boxes, vegetable boxes, anything that was related to kind of what people needed kind of most during the pandemic. I guess we've, in terms of sales outreach, it was coping with the volume of incoming inquiries and making sure that we were kind of taking on the work that we could grow and that was strategic. But we also faced challenges in scaling up the sectors that we were moving into. So we faced similar challenges to everyone else. So it was about reaching the people that we needed to, because obviously in the large retailers, nobody was in their offices. So it was about thinking about how we used marketing and sales together to target them. So we did a lot of cross promotion with new clients, using our clients' LinkedIn networks to promote ourselves. And then I've also, I don't think I've ever spent so much time on LinkedIn in the last year. So building up my own kind of profile there and my own network, and actually using that to directly sell and build relationships, but more than just sell, kind of actually building relationships with the types of companies that we know should be working with us and want to be delivering sustainably, but also trying to educate people about how not just zero emissions vehicles, but how micro consolidation through hubs and also smart technology, the three things are really what will revolutionize last mile logistics.
Brilliant, thanks Suzanne, it's really useful. So one thing that is coming through to me is that you've all kind of touched on is this sort of strategic partnerships and finding creative ways to get to new contacts. So John, could you just talk me through, you mentioned strategic partnerships, and how did you you know, how did you sort of go about that? How did you decide who you were going to work with, and what was your kind of offer to them when you went to them?
I suppose there's a few different components to that, and it helped that the use of strategic partnerships has been core to our business since we started, and so it was already something that we were very comfortable doing. The domestic switching side of our business, our route to market has always been through strategic partnerships. So we don't advertise on TV, but we are promoted by IKEA and Sky, etc. So we were used to, I suppose, talking to businesses and explaining the value proposition that we can offer to them in ways that chime with their strategy, and really understanding what their needs were, and then kind of, I suppose, converting our pitch to adapt to that. And so the transition to trying to do that in terms of the commercial energy brokerage was relatively straightforward. And in fact, many of the organizations that we've been working with to support their customers and employees on the domestic switching side also have contacts with networks of businesses who are interested in switching. Most notably, many of them are trying to actively encourage their supply chain members to reduce their carbon footprints. And so effectively getting those businesses to advocate on our behalf to encourage their supply chain members was a relatively, I suppose, quick win for us, but something that definitely the need to refocus on alternatives really fast tracked. And we've made really great progress with a number of big corporates in terms of engaging with their supply chain members. And I don't think we'd have done that without the additional impetus that the pandemic gave us.
I think, you know, that's coming through a lot in these answers, is that, you know, some of you have had to, try new things faster than perhaps you wouldn't have done before, and perhaps, you know, that's been a kind of a good outcome. Sara, just quickly, you talk about you know, how you stayed really closely connected to clients so that you could get those referrals, which, you know, obviously is a great idea. Could you just talk us through kind of actually how you did that? You know, what was your approach? Was it picking up the phone? Was it sending an email? Was it engaging them in some way on a newsletter? What did you actually do?
I think one of the strong elements of what we do at Healthy Nibbles is trying to stay as closely connected to our clients on an ongoing basis, pandemic or otherwise. That and I think those relationships help, because for us, it's not just about the connections that can come out of that, but it's about really adapting and molding ourselves to what they're actually wanting and what they're going through. And I think certainly within the wellbeing agenda, there's all sorts, you know, wellbeing is such a strong topic, but companies are at various degrees of engaging with the wellbeing message in their businesses. So, you know, for some organizations, it might be sort of swept under with the, I don't know, say the office manager, or for other companies, they've actually got somebody in the C-suite. So for us, by being in constant contact with our clients, we're able to actually understand where's wellbeing sitting, what metrics are going to be sort of really interesting to them, and how can they be best supported. So that's kind of a philosophy for the business anyway. And I think that has actually served us well going into being able to ask for recommendations as we went forward. So it would quite often just be quite an informal email, you know, because it's just part of that sort of day-to-day conversation. I would also probably say that what also sort of came of that was, again, reiterating on some of the things that John's touched about in your last question around the partnership side, and looking at the core areas of where we saw the demand. And it might not necessarily have been where we were sort of focusing originally. So for us, it was very much about aligning ourselves with wellbeing companies. So doing boxes on behalf of or with Vitality, because it linked into everything that they were talking about on their sort of medical cover. Looking at the events industry as they came out of when we got beyond, should we say, the sort of panic of the pandemic and virtual conferences started opening up, event organizers are really struggling to create that experiential element to it, because we kind of all got zoomed out for a bit, and we were there being able to sort of put into those events some tangible elements. So that was really, really key. And then also on the corporate gifting side, as companies started to bring teams together and create that cultural impact for the internal culture, which was really, really important. I guess when you've got teams spread all over the place and not coming together at any point, is to be able to drive that internal communication, the camaraderie, and that those are sort of the routes where we were able to sort of see our best fit over the last 18 months.
Yeah, sounds like you've been very busy. But yeah, I think what's coming through to me is that thing about you've all sat there as, you know, as sort of strategic leaders and gone, okay, where are the opportunities here, and where do we best fit with what's going on? And I think that is something that we can all take with us. You know, if you're not doing that as a business now, really taking some time to think strategically about, you know, where you sit in the market and who's most wants your services, and how you can connect with them, because there's some really good ideas there and examples about positioning, and that I think is really useful. Okay, I'm trying to keep time as well as do everything else, so I think we'll move on now, because I think that the next question actually follows closely on from this one. So you should be able to go into a bit more detail about, you know, what you sort of sales techniques and things you tried. So my next question is about, you know, have you tried any new virtual sales, you know, B2B techniques or approaches or platforms or services or whatever it is you've tried? And if so, you know, which ones do you think you're going to continue with or have become part of, you know, just what you're doing in business development now, and which ones sort of bombed and you felt didn't work? I think that would be a really useful question. So Suzanne, could you maybe talk us through some of your work there?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of virtual techniques, I think that we're a fully remote working company. So our senior management team are scattered to the four winds. So we've got people in Brighton, Cambridge, Oxford, and I'm in London. So it's really been about, I actually think that's presented us with a real opportunity, because we are all about zero emissions. And actually, I think from a sales perspective, the fact that we don't need to go into a prospective client's office and pitch, that we can actually do it remotely over Zoom or, you know, Google Hangouts, that's been really powerful, because it's actually entirely what we're about. We don't want to go into cities and cause more congestion. So and it's about active travel. So I think from my perspective, the fact that the sales now represents what we are advocating, in that let's all just stay home if it's better for the environment, that's a good thing. So in terms of the virtual techniques, we've done a lot of our pitching online. So but not in particularly using particularly fancy techniques. I mean, I would say that it's a little bit of a challenge having so many different platforms that everybody's on, and now everyone's got their preference, whether it's Zoom or Google or Microsoft Teams. That can be a little bit of a faff when you're just about to go into a new meeting and you're trying to get across presenting a deck to a client, and it's not in your preferred format. But I see it as a win-win for our type of business, and I can't really think of any negatives that I've come across. We are exploring podcasts, we're creating more content, and I think it's, as we move forward, we want to start doing things in a slightly more sophisticated way. But at the moment, it's kind of meeting all of our needs, doing it through these platforms.
Right, and you mentioned earlier, Suzanne, that you kind of got to know LinkedIn intimately. So, and obviously that's kind of a key sales tool for us. So for you and for all of us. But so is there anything that you would say that on LinkedIn that you discovered or tried, or you know, that you sort of, yeah, any insights that you can give there?
I think having a point of view on, like, making sure that you as a company and as you as an individual have a point of view on on the sectors that you're operating in, but also in your own sector, and making sure that you are using it for what I think is the main purpose, which is to engage with people rather than sell. So I don't really like doing a hard sell via LinkedIn. I don't think it's the right platform. But I do like joining conversations where there's interest there, and where I think Zedify and me within Zedify have a valuable contribution to make. And that can be, I think because most of us work in sectors that cross over into our private lives, there's a really interesting crossover there. And so I think it's about just jumping into conversations and kind of getting involved, and making sure that, you know, you're connecting with people who may not be ready to work with you now or in the near future, but actually there's an interesting conversation to be had, and you never know where that introduction, you know, that could lead to an introduction to somebody that could be a new business prospect in the future.
Yeah, I have a feeling that that's how we met, actually, was on LinkedIn. So it obviously does work, because we're working together now. So, and you're here, so that's great. Yes, I think LinkedIn is a brilliant tool, like you say. It's just using it in the right way, and not going down the kind of pushy sales route. You know, we've written a whole sort of guide about that, and it is, as you say, about playing the long game sometimes, and having those relevant conversations that, you know, will come back. So that's really useful. Thank you. Seeing what else you said. Yeah, let's move on. So Sara, could you talk to me a bit about, because I know we had a chat about this and you've got some great insights to share on.
Sorry, it went silent, but I wasn't sure whether it cut you off. Yeah, so we engage a lot on digital content, ranging from things like pitching online, a really strong content strategy, which is only continuing to amp up and just become more as a resource center that we're trying to be. So not just looking at, here's some healthy snacks in the box, but actually what that is, you know, how that is impacting the person, how that's impacting our supply. We're really proud that this year we actually achieved B Corp. So that gave us an awful lot of other angles to be able to approach this messaging from. Yeah, I think we mentioned on the chat, I don't know whether this will come across the other way to Suzanne, we used a software called Zotto, and that actually pre-targeted for soft intros to people. Now, I will caveat it, we were certainly not hard selling, but it actually worked really well. When we've just done an analysis over the last 18 months, we were seeing literally thousands of % increase in return on investment in that. It was a really strong route for us. So I think it does go hand in hand with building up your profile really well on LinkedIn first. I've probably invested a lot of time. I would say, yeah, I've invested an awful lot of time in just sort of building up my stance, building up my expertise, and being able to present that in a really sort of sound way on LinkedIn. and joining the right groups. And then, as I say, we implemented this software tool called Zopto. It's fairly low cost. It's about $300 for per quarter. And what that does is you set up a essentially a sequential outreach to targets that you're looking at, either through email or through invites. I think where it does go wrong, it gets a bad rap with some people on LinkedIn, but I think where it does go wrong is where people just blanket sell, and they blanket just go out there and sort of like, oh wait, yeah, you've connected to me, now here's everything that we offer, why don't you take it? Whereas I wouldn't take it all the way through, so you can take as many steps as you want to do that, whereas I stop it after the invite so that I then immediately engage in that conversation with somebody and it becomes far more personal. But that for us has been really, really strong. I think moving forward, we're amping up, as I say, this sort of our content to be more resource centered. We're looking at video, and we will be investing an awful lot in SEO as well. I think what didn't work for us would probably be newsletters. And I don't know if everybody else has probably seen their inbox just grow exponentially over this period, but I think, I can pretty much guess at how many, emails that I would be getting at certain times of the day as you hit those sort of cycles, and you just do blanket deletes. And certainly I have found over this period that the quantity of emails that I get is absolutely ridiculous. So I think you do have to find ways of sort of cutting through that noise and being really, really relevant. And actually, I sometimes think just a straightforward single paragraph sort of plain text is well thought out is actually a far more effective route if you're wanting to actually have a proper conversation with somebody than sort of these blanket mailing lists where you're sending out a MailChimp or something like that. So that's one that necessarily didn't work for us. I would say the pitching online has worked really, really well, and certainly even more so compounded by, as we've gone through B Corp and got that accreditation, the change that I've experienced from pre-COVID of going down to London every single week. We're based in Edinburgh. So just feeling the need to be in London every single week. Versus now, I'm probably, even when we sort of all open up and things get back to whatever version of normal it's going to get back to, don't foresee that actually taking place. I think, yes, I will certainly have to go down, but it's going to be more considered and more specific about what I'm doing and the sort of outcomes that we're actually expecting of that. So I think it's changed an awful lot of things. And I think, yes, a strong reliance on those various sort of digital outreaches.
Yes, yeah, I remember you talking to me, Sara, about the work that you've done about looking at your sort of carbon footprint in terms of going down to meetings, and you were sort of realizing that you didn't need to be doing it anywhere near as often. And I remember when just over a year ago, I was launching the business, and it was fully intended on providing this virtual sales service, and was kind of at the time a bit worried about not having a physical office space somewhere, and should I be more should I sort of hide that fact? And then of course the pandemic hit, and everybody signs up to Zoom, and it suddenly becomes a non-issue. And I think that it will continue to be a non-issue in terms of being able to pitch to somebody online and do that and win business without ever actually having met them face to face. And yeah, it would be lovely to have that hybrid approach back, I think, because I think sometimes there's nothing like sitting across somebody and having a proper face-to-face coffee. But in reality, that's not always going to be possible nowadays. So but just to go back to Zopto, because I think this is an area that a lot of people I think they're interested in. I know it's something that we're interested in. And so just to be clear, Zopto, as far as I know, is a type of software which is a more automated approach to sending out you know, B2B sales messages, and Zopto is not the only one. There's quite a few that have been recommended to us, and I suppose just a caveat with, you know, LinkedIn they're mainly primarily to be used over LinkedIn, and LinkedIn doesn't love them. So
there has been a change, yeah, definitely.
Yes, yeah.
So we use it in conjunction with LinkedIn Sales Navigator.
Yeah.
And Salesforce as the CRM tool. So kind of all of those are working in conjunction with each other. So when it first launched, it was an automatic invite process, and you could pretty much unlimit it. Then I think it was around May, June time, LinkedIn said, right, 100 invites was the cap. And we stopped Zopto actually, because we're like, well, not quite sure of the value of it then, if it can't actually do that. But then since then, Zopto have responded with a number of ways that you can actually, there's some really powerful tools in there actually. So you can target specific users in a specific group. So for us, within specifically looking at vending and the micro markets and wellness hubs, look at something like facility management groups. So who's in that facility management group and what conversation you can sort of generate within that group. Or if, for instance, you've actually launched a post and it's done incredibly well, you can essentially draw from who has liked and engaged with that post to be able to target them. So I think it went through a sort of panic stations. Oh my goodness, this tool is, they probably thought that as a business as well for them. Oh my goodness, LinkedIn has done this. But then since then, it's become more intuitive and more sort of, I think, intuitive with the sales process. So you're actually either engaging with content or you're engaging with a group. I would say you can abuse any one of these. I mean, you could put thousands of contacts in and just spam everybody. That's not the approach we do. It's incredibly considered. We're looking specifically at specific job titles in specific sectors and working with, you know, very niche targets, I guess, in some respects. So we do use it in a very, very considered way.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think these automated tools can be used particularly at the, as you say, the top of the funnel. So, you know, that kind of initial connection request or something where you might have a sort of higher volume need, but equally, if you don't target the right people and you're just going to annoy them, aren't you? And it's going to feel sort of spammy. And also, as we all very much rely on our individual profiles, and I know that a lot of our clients do that, you know, it's really valuable to them. So you don't necessarily want, you know, you as the individual to sort of come across in that way. So
completely. That's why I think that's why on the sequential side, we cap it after the first one. I think the other thing is, you know, I've totally seen it in where it's being completely abused, you know, and I'm sure we all have, where you get, you know, I came across your profile and I saw that you're in health tech or something, or you're in, you know, where they get it completely wrong because they're not actually looking at anything that you're, you know. I've just had something this morning about the awesome work that I'm doing with the charity, which I'm connected to a charity, yes, but I actually ceased being a director, you know, ages ago, and it's still just, it's that type of thing that you want to absolutely avoid. I think the key to effective use of that is taking the time and effort at the beginning to really understand what are you trying to achieve out of that. It comes back to any sales thing that any of us would do, but what are you trying to achieve out of that step? Yeah. What message are you trying to send, and what will be the desired outcome, and keeping it as automated as possible, but also, you know, for us, integrity, authenticity is absolutely key, but we're a small team, so we need to reach those people for that top of the funnel bit piece, but at the same time we're passionate about that authenticity and the sort of one-on-one relationship and going the extra mile with the clients and things. So we don't want to give that wrong impression. There's only, you know, there's only first time for first impressions.
Yes, exactly. Okay, thanks, Sarah. John, have you got anything to add to that? I don't think we've heard from you yet. Anything?
I mean, I think when Sara was speaking just now, and I actually just dug it out while you were talking. I had an approach from someone recently that says on LinkedIn, we don't have any connections in common. It's not the second time your profile popped up in my feed, but hey, I hope you'll accept my invite. And it was so refreshing. I said yes, just because there are so many of those sort of slightly formulaic approaches. I hadn't looked at Zapto, but we had a look at a couple of the alternatives. I think Meet Alfred might be one of them. And I think that the reason we haven't gone for them yet is that balancing act of volume and authenticity, which is just this kind of, they pull in opposite directions. And the LinkedIn approaches that always seem to be most successful for us are the ones that reference an understanding of the organization that you're talking to, for ideally the organization's name, and some understanding what they do or how you might be able to help them, or the pressures they may be going through. And I think that's really difficult with an automated tool, is the first point. And the second point is the amount of research you need to do in order to actually, get the right group of people into the, to set the tool going. It always feels to me as though, you're 90% of the way there to writing the approach to them. And then, I haven't been able to really kind of justify the additional cost in terms of then asking the tool to send them mail on your behalf almost. So yeah, I am, as in common with all of us by the sounds of things, LinkedIn became even more a key tool in our arsenal, during the pandemic and beyond. But I think for us, a lot of the lessons were around authenticity, demonstrating added value, making sure that you were relevant, and the automated tools, we haven't quite got the sophistication yet there in terms of being able to demonstrate a understanding of someone's needs. So yeah, we haven't quite made as much progress with those. I think the broader piece is just, all of those things are, the relevance and the authenticity are just wrapped up, whether you're talking about LinkedIn or blogs and SEO or running webinars. It's all about being able to demonstrate the value that you can offer to people, and that has to run through everything, just understanding their needs and then telling them how you meet it. And that's kind of preaching to suck eggs, but that's fundamentally that sales technique works whichever channel you're using.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to kind of want the sort of magic bullet and the kind of easy answer, but actually, as you've all demonstrated, quality B2B sales approaches take time and perseverance and strategy, and being targeted and clear about kind of who your audience is, and absolutely about authenticity. And that kind of leads me into the final question, really, which is good. So I'd really like to get a sense from all of you about, how do you retain your business's sense of purpose and ethical values when you're undertaking B2B sales activities? And has there ever been a time where you've thought, actually, we just don't think that's the right thing to be doing, when we're not going to be doing it? Because I imagine you're all sort of very protective of your brands and how you come across. So Suzanne, could you start us off on that one?
Yeah, so I think, obviously purpose and ethics are at the core of all of our businesses. And I think I actually learned a lot from the founders when I first joined, because they're quite interesting in that they genuinely just want more. They don't see competition. There's a vast numbers of new companies coming into our space at the moment, but they see that, I find it really refreshing, they see that as a good thing, because they see that as more people adopting cargo bikes and basically and trying to disrupt the kind of incumbent 3PLs. And actually it ultimately will make the streets safer, less congested, less polluted. And I found that my initial thought to that was, that's crazy, but actually it's really refreshing. And so that kind of goes across the whole company now. It's about, we take a very collaborative approach to wanting our cities to be kind of zero emissions, and to promote zero emissions logistics. So in terms of sales, we very much our company is built on being a living wage employer, for example. And actually, we firmly believe that that's kind of goes against the grain in our sector. And I see that as our main point of difference, that and the fact that just cargo bikes by themselves, they are a tool, but coupled with the smart tech and the micro consolidation, it's the three of those things that actually make us unique. Couple with the living wage, being a living wage employer, I think these things are they're fantastic sales tools in their own right. And to be honest, we don't have to, once we get that initial meeting, that sort of sells itself, because we've rejected the gig economy, where we are firmly committed to the environment and to what we what we do. We're firmly believe that it's the best way of changing this sector. And so it's kind of like a rolling stone. We are gathering moss, and the more people that we can kind of get that message across to, it really resonates, especially with sustainability people, obviously, with other ethical businesses. That's where our core business has always been. So, our first clients were the likes of Freddy's Flowers and Abel and Cole. And, we've retained those now, but for us, it's about how do we persuade the companies that maybe they weren't founded on those principles. And that's where the challenge is. But I think that's where the excitement really and the opportunity for real change lies. So I think we're confident that if we just get our message out as widely as possible, we can bring enough people on and persuade them that this is the way forward, because there are cost benefits through consolidation, not necessarily through the carbon bikes by themselves, but it's the consolidation fact that we're mixing consignments. And so if we can get that message across to people pithily, then they come on board, because there's savings to be made, and fundamentally it's about the bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great position to be in, isn't it? You've got all these amazing differentiators that things that you can't help being, which help to embed that in terms of what you say in your sales messages and in meetings. So it's kind of it should be sort of almost easy in that sense, but it's not always that easy to sort of get it across as well in the right way. John, have you got anything to add on this?
No, I mean, probably a different sort of way of saying the same thing, really. I guess as a B Corp and a purpose-driven business, the ethics are in the DNA, and so actually core to how we market our service to certainly sort of businesses is to say to them, we're different from standard TPIs who will hide their commission within a unit rate, usually massively overinflated, get you to sign a contract that commits you to using them for years on end without you being fully aware that that's what you're signing. And actually our entire proposition is that we do things differently. We have transparency over our fees. We detach them from the energy use, so you're not paying more to us if you're using more energy. And so the ethics are sort of bound up in the service that we're selling. And I guess that makes them far harder to detach if you were ever to want to detach them. I suppose the things like the automation tools have been areas where part of the reluctance has been around defending our brand. I think, we've already alluded to the inbox load that is coming from these, it's the same sort of automation software where as long as you don't respond, you're going to continue to get 7, 8 emails in a row, all very formulaic, with no unsubscribe option, which forces you to actually eventually send something really angrily saying, leave me alone. And that's not the brand that we want to be, and that's not the kind of way that we want to be perceived in the market. So I think your point about wanting to defend reputation is totally key there. It's about making sure that you stay true to your values. And then I don't know, being a B Corp has been incredibly powerful for us. That's not very B Corp is a fairly common refrain in team meetings and things, and the way we sort of keep ourselves in check. Of course, all parts of the business, but it's as true in our sales techniques as it is in, you know, corporate governance and how we treat people in HR and all of that sort of stuff. So I think tone from the top, it being in the DNA, and then making sure that you're applying that to the specific kind of question marks over each channel and technique as it comes up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, completely agree. Sarah, have you got anything else to add?
We're just the same. We're also B Corp. I think right from when we started the business, I definitely approached this business very different, because I'd actually, before founding this, I'd lived in Africa for 10 years and seen a juxtaposition between haves and haves nots and various different, you know, corruption, for instance. But then bringing that back over here, I really felt that what we wanted to do was not only impact our clients, but also our employees, the communities around us, and the supply chain. So I think when I came across B Corp, that is essentially what it is wrapped up in. Really, you know, really key on governance and all of the things that, like Don's mentioned, as a fellow sort of B Corp. So I think everything does, when you go through that process, even if you know, initially I probably went in quite not realizing the full depth of B Corp, but then as you go through that accreditation system and sort of deepen your understanding, but also deepen everything that you're doing and extend everything that you're doing around you, there's no chance for it to be anything other than embedded in what you're doing. You'd have to be really fighting against it, I think. So I think that that's just really, really key, just making sure that those values, we recruit based on that, we engage with our supply chain based on that. And I think that just keeps us on this sort of straight and narrow.
Yeah, I mean, I you know, looked closely at B Corp, and it's something that we've got on our roadmap of things to do in the future. And I think it does very much provide a framework in which you're kind of operating as a business, and so you can't help but be influenced in everything when you take on that approach. So but you know, I think what comes across to me strongly really is that thing about you know, authentic approaches, and really genuinely wanting to make a change and provide something of value to your community. And I think that's, you know, I think in a way, as an ethical business, it should be easy. It should be easier. I'm doing a webinar next week with some salespeople from corporate businesses, and talking to them about, you know, purpose-driven sales. And I think it must be much, you know, it's going to be much harder for them to try to sort of get across their mission and values in that sense. So I think perhaps those of us that operate in this space, we're sort of more fortunate than most. So I'm conscious of time. I had a quick question about uplift in sales with the changes that you've made. So, you know, how have you seen an increase in sales or a decrease, or, you know, what sort of happened in your business? I mean, Suzanne, you said an increase, didn't you, in the sense that, you know, things have been going very.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a strong uptick in sales over the last year, and we're kind of forecast for really solid growth. So we plan on being in 45 cities within the next 3 years, so which is really exciting. We're doing that because we're franchise owned. So we basically are owned by locals in our communities, and we hire from those communities. So I think it's a really exciting time, and I think yeah, the sales will obviously help, and we hope to bring on we'd really hope to bring on kind of national retailers, because I think that's where we can actually make the largest change, is by changing the systems that are already in place and trying to unpick those. And they need to be remade and rethought. They're not fit for purpose, and that's not going to happen overnight. I mean, there's organizations like the BRC that are championing it, but it needs government support. So I think there's a sales job, but there's also a societal kind of job to do by all of us as consumers, to kind of vote with our feet or clicks.
Yes, definitely. I've got a question here about the B Corp process, but to be honest, I feel like that's a whole another webinar in itself. We could easily spend an hour just talking about B Corp. I know, having looked at it and gone through the initial assessment, it is a big piece of work, and it takes a long time. Somebody mentioned here about video, and I just wanted to sort of mention briefly that you know, I've certainly been using video in some of my business development activities, and I think, you know, with tools like Loom and Video Ask, that's been quite a nice way of recording, not a pitch necessarily, but you know, recording a response or a brief kind of insight piece, and then overlaying that with your face in a presentation, I found has been quite an interesting approach. So I don't know if any of you, I know Sara, you said you tried that, and you got loads of them on LinkedIn or something. So you
can I just jump in quickly?
Personally.
I just jump in quickly on the B Corp thing, because this is a call about sales, and because we do have some very strong introducer arrangements in place with some organisations that can really help with the B Corp process. So if anyone wants an introduction to one of those, do please get in touch with me, because we ourselves used one, and it made the process a lot easier. So
to be honest,
I would second using somebody.
I think you have to. I think to try and do it on your own would be almost impossible, and there's lots of great support out there now. So yeah, do drop it in the chat or something, John, if you've got someone you can recommend. That'd be great.
I second that, because as doing it individually.
Sorry, Suzanne, what did you say?
We're just going through the process at the moment, so
really?
I think that would be because we're finding it very, although we know that we can do it, it's for a small team, it's incredibly time consuming, and it's a priority.
So we did it on our own, and I would say that I would definitely recommend using somebody.
I'd love to get the recommendation then.
I'll let John do that.
Well, so long as you make sure that they know that we recommended them. We used an organisation called Junxion, Junxion, led by someone called Adam Garfunkel, who's they were just fantastic. And also, one of the reasons I loved them was because they were completely pragmatic. They sent a really long list of the things that they would need for our first meeting, and at the bottom of the email it said, and we know you're really busy and you're not going to have time to do any of this, so we'll just work it through with you when we turn up on the day. And I thought that was just spot on in terms of understanding how businesses of our size kind of operate, and the pressures we're under, and the service that they needed to deliver. So yeah,
definitely. And in the spirit of that, I promised I would keep this to an hour, so I'm afraid we're going to have to call this to a close. I'm just going to briefly share just some next steps for you all. So thank you so much to John, Sara and Suzanne for giving up your valuable time and talking us through your past year. I think it's been really, really helpful, and there's actually been so much content in this session. I think I'm going to need to go away and watch this again. So you can do that. You're all going to get a copy of the recording. And as I said, there's going to be an insight piece coming soon. And just a quick date for everyone's diary is we're doing one more of these webinars before Christmas. And the next one is going to be very much startup focused. So we're going to be talking with Smash and also Enterprise Orchard, and we'll have another panelist as well. And so I hope you can join us. You're all going to get first priority invite for that, everybody who's attended this seminar. So thank you very much for joining us all. Hope you all have a great rest of your afternoons, and thanks again to John, Suzanne and Sara for giving up your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
See you all soon. Bye.
Bye.